Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. It's time for block number 2 in the OklaRoots block party. If you haven't been following along, Jess from OklaRoots and myself have teamed up together. She is doing a quilt block of the month. She's calling it the block party. How cute is that? And each month she comes up with a quilt block. This is the quilt block for this month that she has. She gives you an SVG. She gives you instructions on how to do this. If you don't have a Cricut, she gives you instructions how to make it without a Cricut. And each month she's going to give you a block for 12 months, and at the end you'll have enough to make a full-size quilt. I myself am not a big quilter. I don't have the time nor the patience, to be honest, to create a full-size quilt. So what I'm doing in our partnership, our team effort, is I am coming up with alternative projects that you can make with a quilt block. So you know I'm a queen of quick and easy projects. I like to do something from start to finish in one sit down session. I don't like things that linger and I have to finish it and keep coming back to it. So quick and easy projects. So what I came up with, again, using her quilt block pattern, is a trivet. So I have a ton of these. I actually make these quite a bit. So you just take a quilt block, just like this, the raw quilt block. This one's not turned into anything yet. But you take the quilt block and we add some batting and we add some Insulbright and we make a cute trivet. Now this could also be a hot pad or whatever you want. I'm making it so that I can put this on my countertop to put a hot dish or a hot pan on top of. And I think they're just really cute. I have a ton of these in my drawer, and every time I get them out, people want to know where they came from. So it's a really quick and easy project. I'm going to show you how I did this one. This is the one we're actually going to be making in the video. This was my test one, and it's the one that I shot during the video. But again, this is just a simple quilt block turned into a trivet. So you can still get the fun of quilting without the commitment of time. So you can make something quick and easy. Just a little note, by the way, for this one, I used the Cricut material. And this is really great. It's 12 by 24, so it fits your Cricut mat perfectly. And this is on clearance right now. So I'll link that in the description below the video. Once it sells out, it's probably going to be gone. But I will link this in the video description if you're interested in making one just like this. Also, if you don't have a Cricut, she has other directions for you in her video to cut this out by hand. She has lots of tips on how to quilt together or how to piece together this quilt block. And for those of you who have the Cricut, again, she has an SVG file. So you can just upload that into your Cricut and let it cut it out. And that's exactly what I did. I uploaded the SVG into Cricut Design Space and then let it cut out all the pieces. And this is a pretty simple block to put together. So again, we're just going to go from a quilt block to a trivet. Super easy. And if you missed last month, which was block number 1, this is block number 2. Last month, I made a card out of a quilt block using cardstock and my Cricut. So without further ado, let's get started on our trivet. I'm not going to walk you through how to put the actual quilt block together. You're going to go over to Jess's channel and check out her tutorial. She's going to walk you through step by step on how to piece this together. When you're finished with your quilt block, it should measure about 10.5 by 10.5. But the beauty of this project is if it's a little bit under, a little bit over, it doesn't matter. So your finished quilt block is going to be about 10.5 by 10.5. It might be over or under, like I said, but you're going to need that. And then you're going to need another piece of fabric that is slightly bigger. I made mine about 1 inch bigger, but I would suggest going at least 2 inches bigger than your finished block. Next, we're going to need our batting. Now I have a piece of batting, and again, you want to go about 2 inches bigger than your block. It should be the same size as your fabric. And then I have a piece of Insulbright. Insulbright has a shiny side. This is made to deflect the heat away from your hand or whatever you're holding on to. It deflects the heat back into what you're holding on to. So Insulbright and then a piece of batting. It can be cotton batting, polyester, whatever you want. I just have a polyester blend here. Then you're going to need a piece of fabric 2¼ inches wide by however big your block is times 4 plus about 6 inches. And all I did was cut strips and then sew them together, right sides together, just right across the top. Press those seams open until I had a piece of fabric that was long enough. So You want to say 10.5 by 4 is 42 inches. So 10.5 on all 4 sides, 42 inches. And then you want to add another 6 inches. So it needs to be about 48 inches long, and that's going to give you plenty. Once you have your strip of 48 inches or so, fold it in half lengthwise and press it. So what we're going to do is take our backing fabric right side down, and then we're going to take our Insulbrite and our other batting and put that right in the middle. And you don't have to worry about squaring up your quilt block quite yet. Just go ahead and lay your quilt block right on top of this sandwich. So you're looking at your backing fabric is pretty side down, and then 2 layers of the middle, the batting, and then your quilt block pretty side up. You can take safety pins and pin this together so that the fabric doesn't shift, but I like to use this 505 temporary adhesive, and this keeps everything from shifting as you're sewing. You just spray a light coat on it, and be careful, you don't want to spray this around your machines, or they say spray it outside. I spray it inside, but just be careful. The spray does kind of get on things. So I am just spraying this all through my sandwich. I'm spraying my fabric down, and then you just kind of smooth your fabric out. And this keeps things from shifting as you quilt this sandwich together. It keeps your fabric from walking away on you. And then I'm going to put a little bit here in between my batting layers. And again, I'm just trying, and I'm very lightly spraying this, and I'll have it linked in the description below the video, just enough to keep things from moving as I'm sewing. I am going to use my walking foot on my sewing machine. You don't have to, but it definitely keeps it, or makes things a lot easier. It keeps your fabric from shifting. So once you have your sandwich all done, now you get to quilt. I'm just going to quilt along my seams. But if you wanted to do a diagonal pattern or a checkered pattern or just straight lines, you can do whatever you want. I am just going to sew along the quilt block lines. Just remember, whatever pattern you're putting on the front is going to show on the back. So mine's going to have that same shape as the quilt block on the back side. But if you want to do a diagonal pattern, whatever you want, this is your trivet. Do it your way. I'm going to take this over to my machine, and I'm just going to stitch with a 3.5 inch stitch length along all of my seam lines. And as you can see, I've got mine all stitched and quilted. All I did was stitch right along the seam lines, and you can see I have the same pattern on the back. But again, you can do whatever pattern you want. So now we're going to trim this up. So I have a ruler here, and I'm just going to line the edge up where that I can see that I'm getting all 3 layers. And I'm going to use the grid lines of the ruler and just find some of these straight lines and line it up with that, some of the straight lines of the seams. And I'm just going to make my first cut, cutting again through all 3 layers. And now I have a straight edge to kind of guide me through the rest of the trimming. So again, I'm lining up that bottom edge now, which I know is straight, and I'm lining up the horizontal and vertical lines with the seam lines in my quilt block so that I can make sure everything stays true to size and straight. So now I have 2 straight edges. I can line up this edge and the bottom edge that I just cut, and I know that it's going to be a square cut. So I just want to remind you that I am not a quilter. I don't profess to be a quilter or anything like that. So I have great respect for those who are, but I'm just showing you how I create a quick and easy project out of a quilt block. So for those of you who are quilters that watch this, I have great respect for you. Please excuse my method of madness, but I'm just doing what works for me. So once I have this all trimmed up, you can see everything is nice and even and squared off. What I'm going to do is take this over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch as close to the edge as I can all the way around the edge. And that's just going to keep that fabric nice and flat for the next step. I find this very helpful. So it looks something like this when you're done. You can see I stitched all the way around the edges, and that just made everything nice and smooth and lay flat. And if you haven't already, I would take the time to trim off any loose threads or anything that's going to get in the way of adding our binding. Now, binding is a talent that I don't really possess, but I have done it enough that I have a method that works for me that's good enough. So again, you're going to take that long strip of fabric that you sewed together, fold it in half, and press it. I like to sew it to the front and roll it to the back. Some people machine quilt and suggest that you sew it to the back and roll it to the front. This is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to lay it on the front on one side, and where the clip is about where I'm going to start sewing, even though I have that tail. You want that extra 4, 5, 6 inches of tail at the top to give you room so that when we bind this, we have room to connect it, and I'll get to that part. So you're going to start by just putting one clip on near the bottom third or so. And if you're new to binding, I would take the time to use a ruler and then mark about 1/4 inch from the edge, unless you're pretty good at eyeballing the 1/4 inch. I can do it without marking it now, but that pin represents 1/4 inch from the edge of the block. So I'm going to sew from that clip to the pin, and then I'm just going to backstitch like 2 stitches just to secure it in place. So take that over to your sewing machine and stitch that bottom little corner, stop at your pin. Once you've sewn that corner down and you've stopped at the pin, remove it from your machine. This is what it looks like. You can see I still have that tail up on the top. So you're going to take the tail, the long end. You've got this tail on the top. That's where you started. You're going to take the opposite end where you stopped at the 1/4 inch, and you're going to fold the fabric so that it lines up with the bottom of your quilt block horizontally. So you have a straight line from here all the way over here. And then what I find it easiest to do is to put my finger down right there and hold that into place and then pull it back. And you want to line that straight edge up, that fold, and keep it lined up on the bottom and clip it. And then you can go ahead and clip it again. And you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to stitch from here all the way down and stop at 1/4 inch before you get to the edge of that block. If you want to mark it again, go ahead. So here's what we got so far. We started on the top, we sewed down, we folded our edge. Now we've sewn to the 1/4. Again, we're going to fold it out to the right. Make sure it's straight with the bottom of the quilt block. Put your finger down, hold that into place while you flip it back over towards the direction we want to sew. Line that corner up. Clip it. And I do all this right at the sewing machine. And then you're going to continue sewing down, stop 1/4 inch from the edge. And then you're going to do the same thing and finish, go up to the next side. Turn your corner again, and then you're only going to sew down about 1 inch. So you don't want to go down too far. You're only going to sew about 1 inch, backstitch, and stop. So you will have a good 3, 3.5, 4 inches open from where you started and where you stopped. So go ahead and finish your last 2 corners. So here's what mine looks like. You can see I've got all 3 corners done, and I have my stopping point and my beginning point, and there's an opening right here. That's what you want. Now there are lots of ways to join binding, but this is a trivet, so I'm going to show you the really easy way to join this. There's ways to do it so that you have less bulk and you cut it on the diagonal, but I'm just keeping this quick and easy. So you're going to cut it off about halfway in between the 2 pieces. Just make a straight cut on one of your tails. Then take the other tail, and you need a ruler, and you're going to overlap that tail by 1/2 inch. So I'm going to put the edge of this tail right here on my inch line. So it's lined up right there. And then I'm going to take this tail and cross it over and cut it at 1/2 inch over where they cross. And make a straight cut. So now you can see these are overlapped by a 1/2 inch. So that one, you can see it's overlapped by about a 1/2 inch, and that's perfect. Don't make it bigger than that because then you'll have too much room. So what I find easiest to do right now is to fold this in half and put a couple clips in the trivet itself. That's going to keep you from wrestling with this. What our objective is to put the two pretty sides together. And again, if you clip this into place, you won't be wrestling it. So you're going to put, and I don't even pin this, I just do it at the machine and sew it. But for the sake of the video, I will go ahead and clip this into place. But again, like I said, if you just clip that trivet together, that you won't be wrestling with it so much. It won't be trying to open up on you. So go ahead and put the pretty sides of the fabric together. Make sure they're not twisted. Just, it's nothing fancy here. Again, these clips are a little bit bulky, but it's what I have close here. And then you're just going to stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, not a scant 1/4 inch. You need a 1/4 inch, otherwise it's going to be too sloppy. So you're just going to stitch that straight edge right across the top with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, right across there. Once you have that done, it'll look something like this. You can take your clips out and kind of test it and look, make sure it looks right. And then reach inside there and just finger press that seam open and then fold it back up. Just like that. Perfect. Now you can go ahead and finish that seam so that you close up this opening. So I'm going to start a few stitches back from where I ended and sew down that side, closing that up and ending just over where I started. So now it looks like this. So what I like to do at this point is take it over to my ironing surface and iron those edges out. I just leave it open like this and just push it out with the iron so that everything is going to lay nice and flat. And once you've pressed it, it'll look something like this. Now we're going to flip it over and pull that binding over towards the back side. And you're just going to gently fold it over. It shouldn't be super, super tight. You want it to be snug, but not tight. So start pinning on one of your sides. So now we have the side pinned down and we have this nice little triangle. I like to use an awl or your seam ripper and hold that corner down and lift the side up. And then use a straight pin when I have that nice and even and put that right there in the corner to make that nice mitered diagonal corner. Just like that. Actually, you should put the pin the other direction so that the head is facing the outer corner so that you can see that when we sew this down so you can pull it out. But just continue to clip the sides. And then we're going to do another corner, and I'll show you that one more time. So we're going to, the corners folded down. We're just going to put something to hold it in place and then lift that side up so that it makes that nice angled corner. Just like that. And again, I like to put a straight pin in the corners. I just think it keeps them in place a little bit better. When you're folding your sides up, it should make sure that it's covering that seam that we did around the edge. It should without any problem, but and you can see we're just going to go ahead and clip it all the way around. When you get to your last corner, you might need to undo one of your first clips just to give you room to work. But that's not a big deal. You can always reclip it. But just try to get those corners nice and angled. You'll know when you have it right. It'll look like everything lines up evenly. And again, some people like to sew the binding on the back and do this part on the front. I prefer to do it this way because I want the front to look nice and neat. So now what you're going to do is take it over the sewing machine and you're going to stitch it from the top, but we're going to stitch right in that seam line around the binding. So right, it's called stitch in the ditch, and you're just going to stitch right inside that seam line, and that will catch the binding on the back side. So watch out for your pins. Again, like I said, you should have put the heads of the pins sticking out so that you can see those. And that's it. You've got your finished trivet. Again, I like to do these with all kinds of quilt blocks just for a quick and easy project to do. I think it's pretty on the table. And you can see when you stitched in the ditch on the front, you can't even see that seam. And if you go off a little bit, who cares? It's a trivet. So I'm hosting this block party in my Sewing Patterns and Tutorials with Lorrie Nunemaker Facebook group. I'll have that linked in the description below the video. If you guys are playing along, making the blocks, whether it's the quilt or the alternative projects, please join us in the group and post your projects. I'd love to see them. I hope you enjoyed today's project with block number 2 from the block party with OklaRoots. I'm having a lot of fun coming up with alternative projects that are quick and easy to make with a single quilt block. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to check out the links below the video. And until next time, never stop making. See you guys. Bye-bye.